Have you ever stopped in the middle of the day with a strange, sticky feeling that you've been deceived? No, not in the store where they shortchanged you, and not in the bank where they pushed insurance on you. I'm talking about a more global deception. The feeling that your entire life, all your races for success, a new car, a bigger apartment, this is a hamster wheel run that someone is spinning from the outside. We've gotten used to thinking that credit is a tool that lets you get what you want here and now. We're told that a mortgage is affordable housing and a car loan is freedom of movement. But have you never asked yourself why, year after year, despite advances in technology, robots, and artificial intelligence, do we have to work more and more while our real assets dwindle? Why could our grandfathers build a house with their own hands and leave it to their grandchildren, while we pay for a concrete box for 30 years, overpaying 3 times the price, and still fear that it will be taken away for a missed payment? They don't teach this in school. They don't talk about it in the evening news, because the truth would destroy the foundation on which the modern economy stands. The truth is that the system isn't broken. It works perfectly. It's just not built for you to become rich. It's built so that you are forever busy and forever in debt. Let's rewind the tape back. Not 100 years, but a bit deeper, to the very principle of how we understand property. Remember old things. Solid oak furniture that served 3 generations. Tools passed down from father to son. Clothing that could be remade, but the fabric didn't fall apart after the 5th wash. The world of the past was a world of accumulation and preservation. Man was autonomous. If you had a house, a well, and a piece of land, you were practically invulnerable to the system. You could survive a crisis, war, crop failure. You were the master of your fate. But a master is a bad customer. You can't sell a master what he already has. You can't make a master work for pennies because he has a safety cushion. And then, around the beginning of the 20th century, the architects of the new reality realized, to control the masses, you need to deprive them of autonomy. You need to replace the concept of reliability with the concept of accessibility. This didn't happen in one day. It was a brilliant, cold, and cynical operation to reprogram the consciousness of an entire planet. Did you know that the very concept of planned obsolescence was introduced artificially? It's not a natural process of technological development. It's a conspiracy. And I'm not using that word for effect. There is a documented fact that economic historians mention only in passing, in small print in footnotes. In Geneva, during the Christmas holidays of 1924, a group of gentlemen in expensive suits gathered. These were representatives of the world's largest electric light bulb manufacturers: Philips, Osram, General Electric, and others. At that time, technology allowed for the creation of light bulbs that burned for 2,500 hours and longer. There were specimens that worked for years. But the gentleman calculated the losses. If a person buys a light bulb once every 5 years, factories stop, profits fall. That day, the Phoebus cartel was created. They signed a secret agreement under which no manufacturer in the world was allowed to produce lamps that lasted longer than 1,000 hours. Strict fines were introduced for factories whose products turned out to be too high quality. Just think about it. Engineers, the best minds of that time, were forced to deliberately worsen the product. They were made to find ways to make the filament more fragile so that it would guaranteedly burn out after a certain time. This was the first warning bell, the first test of the pen. If you can make a light bulb die on schedule, why not do the same with a car, with a refrigerator, with clothing, and ultimately, with the person themselves? From that moment, the world turned onto the path leading to the dead end we're in now. The concept of defect engineering was launched. Things became disposable. But a problem arose. If a thing breaks quickly, a person needs to buy a new one often. And where to get the money if wages don't grow as fast as corporate appetites? Here, the second act of this drama takes the stage. The system had to give people the illusion of wealth, money that doesn't exist. Until the mid-20th century, living in debt was considered a disgrace. In most cultures of the world, from Europe to Asia, a person who couldn't pay their bills became an outcast. Credit was taken only in the most extreme cases, for business development or medical treatment. Taking out a loan to buy new curtains or a sea vacation, that would be considered madness. The psychology of the masses was tuned to saving. Earn first, then buy. This model made a person independent. If you have savings, you can quit a hated job. You can say no to a tyrannical boss. You can move. Savings are your personal freedom converted into money. But the system doesn't need free people. It needs obedient cogs. And then a massive attack began on the very concept of thriftiness. Through advertising, cinema, and glossy magazines, they started instilling a new religion in us. The religion of consumption. They told us, you deserve the best right now. Why wait? Live one day at a time. Look at how the language has changed. They used to say thrifty. Now they say stingy or loser. They used to say wasteful. Now they say successful, status conscious, knows how to live. This is linguistic programming. Words change thinking. They've conditioned us to think that owning a thing is boring. Renting, leasing, subscriptions, that's the new trend. But what is a subscription? It's a tax on air. You pay for music you can't put on a shelf. You pay for features in your car that the manufacturer can remotely disable if you miss a payment. You don't even own the programs on your computer. You just buy temporary rights to use them. This is the main trap. The shift from ownership rights to access rights. Ownership gives you power. Access makes you dependent on whoever holds the switch. But to pull this off on a global scale, they had to change the very structure of money. They had to make saving unprofitable. Remember the old folks' stories. Back then, a gold coin hidden in a chest remained the same gold coin after 50 years, enough to buy a cow or a house. And what happens to paper money now if you stuff it under the mattress? In 10 years, it turns to dust. Inflation isn't a natural disaster, as economists on screens try to explain. Inflation is a hidden tax that you pay every day without noticing. It's the whip that drives you to spend, spend, spend. Don't save, they say. Money will burn up. Take a loan. Buy the goods before they get more expensive. They've created an artificial environment for you where rational behavior, saving resources, has become economically disadvantageous, and irrational behavior, living beyond your means, has become the only way to maintain the appearance of a normal life. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've only begun to scratch the surface. Now we'll go much deeper down the rabbit hole. We'll talk about walls. Not the ones that protect you from the wind, but those invisible legal walls that grew up around every person in the 20th century. Have you ever wondered why in the 19th century a family of poor settlers could arrive in an empty place and build a house in a year that stood for centuries? While today, you don't have the right to even drive a pile into your own land without a stack of papers as thick as a brick. They're telling us it's for safety. It's civilization. But if we remove emotions and look at the dry facts and dates, a frightening picture of synchronized enslavement through bureaucracy will open before us. This isn't care. It's a ban on poverty, a ban on life outside the system. Let's look at the United States of America in the 1930s, the Great Depression. It would seem that people needed maximum freedom to survive, but it was precisely in 1934 that the National Housing Act was passed. Sounds great, doesn't it? The Federal Housing Administration is created. The official goal is to make housing affordable. But what really happens? Before this moment, mortgages were completely different. They were issued for 3 or 5 years, and people paid mainly interest, then paid off the debt or refinanced. This was inconvenient for bankers. The new law standardized mortgages for 20 and 30 years. That's when the concept was born that it's normal to pay for a roof over your head your entire working life. Instead of allowing people to build cheap homes within their means, the system said, no, you must buy an expensive house built to our standards and pay the bank for it until old age. This law didn't give housing, it gave shackles. It institutionalized debt as the only form of existence. Now let's cross the ocean. United Kingdom, 1947. The war ended, the country in ruins, needs to rebuild. And what does the government do? It passes the Town and Country Planning Act. This was the moment when the British were effectively robbed of their right to development. Before that day, if you owned land, you could build a house on it. It was your natural right. The 1947 Act nationalized the right to development. Now you own the land, but the right to do anything on it belongs to the state, and you have to buy that right back in the form of permits. Notice the synchronicity. In different parts of the world, under different pretexts, in America it's an economic crisis, in England, post-war recovery, the same mechanism is introduced. The mechanism that makes autonomous construction impossible. You can no longer call your neighbors, mix clay with straw, and build a warm house for free. It has become illegal. Building codes and regulations, which began to be introduced everywhere in the mid-century, dictated the use of industrial materials. You are required to buy cement, rebar, certified insulation. You are required to become a customer of corporations. Autonomy was declared illegal. Look how cunningly they substituted concepts. The linguistic analysis here is simply devastating. Previously, there was the concept of right. Right to housing, right to work, right to movement. A right is something you have by virtue of birth. It can't be taken away. You don't need to buy it. But in the mid-20th century, the word right was quietly replaced with license or permit. What is a license? It's a privilege that the authorities sell to you for money and can take away at any moment. A fishing license means that the fish in the river no longer belong to everyone. They belong to the state. A building permit means that your land doesn't belong to you. A driver's license is the transformation of the right to free movement into a privilege regulated by traffic rules, fines, and insurance. We didn't notice how the entire world around us turned from an open space into a restricted facility where you need a ticket for every action. And this process snowballed. Look at France. April 10th, 1954. Economist Maurice Laurey introduces value-added tax, known to us as VAT. First in France, then it spreads across all of Europe and the world. Think about the meaning of this tax. It's a tax on every movement of goods. It makes artisanal production and long chains of small intermediaries unprofitable. It's beneficial only to large, vertically integrated corporations. VAT is the killer of small business and independent craftsmen. If you make a chair yourself, you don't pay VAT within the process. But the system has built the economy so that it's more profitable for you to buy a chair in a giant store than to make it yourself or order from a neighbor. The tax system was restructured to squeeze people out of the garage economy into the corporate sector. You were forced out of the shadows, not to protect you, but to tax every one of your actions. It feels like, after World War II, someone pressed the global unification button. In different countries, with different cultures and political regimes, identical standards for education, medicine, and construction began to be introduced. As if all the governments of the world started reading the same playbook. Schools stopped teaching financial literacy and logic, replacing them with rote memorization of facts. Why? Because a person who can calculate compound interest will never take out a payday loan. A person who knows formal logic will never believe a politician. The education system was tasked with producing qualified consumers and performers, not creators. Competence became dangerous. If you can heal yourself with herbs, you won't go to the pharmacy. If you can repair things, you won't buy new ones. That's why in some countries they started introducing laws prohibiting the repair of complex equipment by uncertified specialists. In the United States of America, farmers are suing tractor manufacturers for the right to repair their own tractors because the software is locked. This is no accident. This is the finale of the game that began in the 1920s with the light bulb. We see a clear pattern. First, dependence on industrial goods is created. Then, alternative, cheap ways of survival are legislatively banned. DIY construction, folk medicine, cash trade without registers. Then, a financial system is introduced that forces borrowing. And finally, all this is cemented with a layer of bureaucracy where every step requires a paper with a stamp. Man has been driven into a corridor. He's left with only one path: school, wage job, mortgage, pension, if he lives that long. Any step to the left or right is punished with a fine or prison. We live in a world where being free is expensive and being dependent is affordable. A credit card is issued in 5 minutes via an app. Try getting a plot of land for a garden in the same 5 minutes. Feel the difference? The system rewards your weakness and punishes your strength. It's time to look the beast in the face, the one devouring the fruits of your labor. You wake up to an alarm, drive in traffic jams, put up with a boss, return home exhausted. You think you're working for a salary? That's an illusion. The math of the modern economy is ruthless. Most of your life, you work to service interest. An invisible partner sits in your wallet, and its appetites grow every year. Let's break down the mechanics of this robbery that economics textbooks are silent about. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the dry language of legal acts and corporate strategies that turned the free market into a financial concentration camp. It all started with the substitution of the concept of trust. Previously, a person's reputation was their capital. A merchant's word, a handshake, personal acquaintance with the banker, these determined your financial reliability. But the system doesn't need personal connections. It needs digital control. In 1989, in the United States of America, what seemed like an unnoticeable event occurred that forever changed the rules of the game. Fair Isaac Corporation introduced a standardized creditworthiness assessment system, which we know as the FICO score. Think about the cynicism of this scheme. To have a high score, you must take on debt. If you live within your means, if you've never taken loans and pay in cash, to the system, you are a ghost. You are suspicious. You have no credit history, which means you can't rent a normal apartment, get good insurance, or land certain jobs. You are forced into debt, not because you need the money, but to prove your loyalty to the system. This was the first step toward gamifying slavery. Behave well, pay interest on time, and we'll raise your rating, allowing you to borrow even more. But the real economic revolution that tightened the noose around the middle class's neck happened a bit later. On November 12, 1999, the Financial Services Modernization Act, also known as the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, was signed. This was the day when financial predators were unleashed. Up to that moment, there was a wall between regular banks, where citizens' savings were kept, and investment banks that gambled on the stock exchange with high risks. This law tore down the wall. Your deposits, your payroll accounts, your pension savings became fuel for the global casino. Banks began merging into giant conglomerates, too big to fail. Monopolies didn't arise out of nowhere. They were created legislatively. Now, if such a giant loses your money on risky derivative bets, the state bails it out using your own taxes.
Profits are privatized, losses nationalized. This is the perfect scheme for pumping wealth from the working population to the financial elite. However, the most terrifying trap was prepared for the youth. The architects of the system understood. To make a person submissive for life, you need to chain them in shackles even before they start earning. In April 2005, in the United States of America, the Bankruptcy Abuse Prevention and Consumer Protection Act is passed. The name sounds noble, as always, but inside this document was sewn a time bomb. This law made it practically impossible to discharge student loan debts even through bankruptcy proceedings. You can go bankrupt if you lost millions at a casino. You can discharge business debts, but the debt for a degree that may not have even helped you find a job will stay with you until the grave. This created a class of eternal debtors. Young people enter life with a negative balance. They can't save for a house. They can't risk starting their own business. They are forced to take any job just to service the interest. This is the destruction of the social ladder. Education, which for centuries was a path to freedom, turned into a tool of enslavement. Look at how synchronously asset prices began to rise worldwide, while real wages stagnated. This isn't a market. It's regulated asphyxiation. Real estate prices go up not because bricks turn to gold, but because the availability of cheap, long-term money inflated demand. You're given a 30-year mortgage at a low interest rate, and you rejoice. But because this mortgage is given to everyone, housing prices skyrocket. In the end, you pay for a concrete box a price your parents could have bought 3 such boxes for. Only the bank and the developer win. You get the illusion of ownership and the reality of a debt pit. The system encourages asset inflation because it's profitable for capital owners, and it kills the purchasing power of money because it keeps wage workers in fear of losing their jobs. And one more important point, the destruction of competition through regulations. Have you ever wondered why little neighborhood stores are disappearing while chains take over blocks? Because a large chain can afford a staff of lawyers to comply with thousands of insane rules introduced in the last few decades, while an independent can't. Introducing endless requirements for certification, labeling, reporting, this is an economic filter. It's designed specifically to remove independent players from the field. You're deprived of choice. You're forced to go to the supermarket, buy corporate goods, pay with a card from a bank owned by the same financial group, and take out a loan for the purchase because the salary paid by that same corporation isn't enough for you. A closed loop. Who benefits from this? Look for those who control the flows of liquidity. Funds managing trillions in assets have become the real owners of the world. They own stakes in banks, tech giants, pharmaceuticals, and the food industry. They don't need your freedom. They need your monthly payment, a lifetime subscription. You pay for music, for movies, for data storage, for food delivery, for car rentals. You have nothing of your own except debts. This is the very economic model we've been led to throughout the 20th century, turning the citizen into a user with limited rights and unlimited liability. The deeper I dug,
the clearer the picture of a global corral emerged. They didn't just change the laws, they changed the very essence of money and labor. Previously, labor created capital. Now, debt creates money. And in this system, the working person will always lose to the one printing debt notes. We are inside a giant vacuum cleaner that sucks time and resources from the bottom and transfers them to the top. And if you think it can't get worse, you're wrong. We've reached the moment of truth. If up to now we've discussed economic nooses and bureaucratic labyrinths, now we must look the truth in the eye and admit the cage has slammed shut. This happened not with the clang of prison bars, but under the quiet hum of servers and the rustle of pages of new regulations. We've entered the phase that sociologists call architecture of no alternatives. It's a state where you formally have a choice of 100 cheese varieties, but no choice not to participate in the system that distributes that cheese. The cage is no longer outside, it's inside your way of life. You can't just go off into the woods because the forests are accounted for, and your survival skills have atrophied. Let's return to the key date that, in my opinion, became the point of no return on technology ownership. October 28, 1998. The President of the United States signs the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA. It seems like protecting against piracy is a good thing, but the devil, as always, is in the details. This law criminalized circumventing technical protection measures. In plain human language, this meant the beginning of the end of private ownership of complex devices. From that moment, when buying a tractor, phone, or car, you're buying only the hardware. The software that brings that hardware to life doesn't belong to you. You're a tenant of your own property. The corporation can programmatically limit the engine's power, disable features, or turn the device into a brick if it decides you violated the license agreement. This is digital feudalism. You till the land on the master's tractor, and the master decides if that tractor will work tomorrow. But technology is only half the trouble. To control the population, you need to control basic needs, food and security. On January 4, 2011, the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, was signed. Once again, the safety screen hides a ruthless market purge. This act gave regulatory agencies unprecedented powers to control farmers. Reporting, equipment, and inspection requirements became so expensive and complex that small farms began going bankrupt by the thousands. Who took their place? Agribusiness giants. Titans that grow modified food on depleted lands, dousing them with chemicals. The system artificially created a bottleneck. Now food reaches cities through a few giant logistics centers. If you cut off those arteries, a metropolis will start starving in 3 days. This isn't a market. It's a ration distribution system disguised as supermarkets. We've become dependent on supply chains we don't control or understand. And while they were stripping us of autonomy in production and consumption, a quiet war was waged against the last remaining tool of freedom: cash money. Have you noticed how insistently they push you to pay by card, phone, smile? How Europe and Asia synchronously began lowering cash transaction limits. In France, for example, from September 1, 2015, it's prohibited to pay cash for purchases over 1,000 euros. They're telling you it's a fight against terrorism and money laundering. But logic suggests otherwise. Cash is the only form of money that works without electricity and without an intermediary. It's your money. Money on a card is the bank's money to which you're just given access. Shifting all payments to digital means any person can be turned off with one button press. An unwelcome journalist? account blocked. A protest participant, card blocked. This is absolute power that past dictators couldn't even dream of. The closing of the cage happens at the intersection of loss of skills and loss of rights. Look at modern education. Schools have eliminated labor classes where they taught hands-on work. They were replaced with design and presentations. We've raised a generation that can't fix an outlet, can't grow potatoes, can't navigate by the stars. This generation is perfect for the system. They are excellent consumers of ready-made solutions. They are helpless without a smartphone. If the internet goes down tomorrow, for them it will be the end of the world, because all their knowledge, all their money, and all their social life are in the cloud. And the cloud is just someone else's computer. Now put the puzzle together. You don't own your home, mortgage and perpetual property taxes. You don't own your gadgets, license agreements and non-repairability. You don't own your food, agribusiness monopolies. You don't own your money, digital entries in a bank. You live by subscription. This is that very great reset that so many whisper about. It's not a single event, not an explosion or a flood. It's a smooth change in humanity's legal status. We've been shifted from the status of citizens and owners to the status of users and personnel. The system has closed the loop. We are inside a smart city, which in fact is a digital panopticon. Cameras with facial recognition, algorithms predicting your behavior, credit scores determining your fate. This is no longer capitalism. In capitalism, there is risk and competition. Here, risks are removed for the elite and shifted onto us, and competition is replaced with monopoly. We live in the scenery of freedom, but the script is plotted out years in advance. The scariest thing about this trap is its comfort. The cage is warm, with high-speed internet and pizza delivery. That's why no one rebels. The illusion of accessibility worked. Credit gave the opportunity to buy a plasma TV to watch shows that distract from reality. The mortgage tied you to your job more reliably than chains. And the loss of fundamental knowledge made us unable to imagine an alternative. We've forgotten how to live differently. Here we are at the finale. We've dissected the mechanism, lubricated with greed, tightened with bureaucracy, and running on the fuel of our indifference. But the most important question still hangs in the air. What to do about it? If the system is so powerful, if it controls money, laws, land, and even our habits, is there a way out? Or are we doomed to be batteries in this matrix of consumption? The answer may scare you, but it will also free you. There is a way out, but it's not where you're looking for it. It's not in revolutions in the squares, not in changing one political party for another, and certainly not in waiting for a good czar who will forgive everyone's debts. The way out starts with realizing that the scenery we live in is made of cardboard. The modern economic system, despite all its monumentality, is incredibly fragile. It's built on the just-in-time principle. Stores have no warehouses, factories have no raw material reserves, banks have no cash for all depositors. Everything holds on continuous movement of digital zeros and ones. This is a colossus on clay feet that fears any stoppage. Remember how quickly shelves empty at the slightest logistics glitch. This fragility is not a mistake. It's the price for maximum efficiency in profit extraction. The system is optimized to suck resources to the last drop, leaving no margin of safety. And it's precisely in this fragility that your chance lies. To stop being a victim, you need to stop being the ideal consumer. The system wants you to be predictable. To work from 9 to 5, spend everything on Friday, take a loan on Saturday, and fear Monday. Your rebellion must be quiet, but fundamental. It's a rebellion of competence and reality. Every time you repair a thing instead of throwing it away and buying a new one, you strike a blow at the corporation. Every time you buy products from a farmer for cash, bypassing the supermarket checkout and bank terminal, you deprive the system of tax and information about you. Every time you learn something real, laying a stove, sewing, providing first aid, you become less dependent. You become inconvenient. The philosophy of resistance in the 21st century is a return to reality. They're trying to convince us that owning something physical is old-fashioned and burdensome. They tell us everything should be in the cloud, on subscription, in sharing. But in a crisis moment, when electricity goes out or the server crashes, the sharing account owner is left on the street in the rain, while the owner of an old car with a mechanical key drives home. Real assets are gold, land, tools, knowledge, and social connections. Digital assets are promises that can be annulled in 1 second by changing the user agreement. We live in an era of simulacra. Money is not gold, but an entry in a database. Friends on social networks are not people who will help in trouble, but avatars. News is not facts, but interpretations. To wake up, you need to start touching the world with your hands. Create horizontal connections. Get to know your neighbors. The system fears communities that can self-organize without its involvement. If people in your building know each other and are ready to help, you need the police, insurance company, and management less. Atomization of society is the main tool of control. Divide and conquer is a principle as old as the world. Unite and create. That's our answer. Don't wait for a global collapse or apocalypse to start living differently. The collapse is already underway. It's just slow and creeping. It manifests in the fact that year after year you work more but get less quality of life. Inflation eats savings. Laws eat rights. Rescuing the drowning is the drowning's own business. Start forming your personal sovereignty. Let it be small. Let it be just a cash safety cushion, a paid-off loan, or a mastered craft. This is already territory of freedom that the collector's or bureaucrat's hand can't reach. Remember that the most valuable resource, for which the war is being waged, is not oil or data. It's your attention and your will. The system spends trillions of dollars on marketing, propaganda, and entertainment only so that you don't look around, so that you don't ask questions, so that you consider a 30-year mortgage happiness and a new phone the goal of life. As soon as you take your attention away from television and social networks and direct it to your family, your health, and your education, you exit the game. You stop feeding the egregore. We examined the history of elite betrayal. We saw the dates when they stripped us of rights. We understood the mechanics of debt slavery. Now you have a map of the minefield. But you'll have to walk it yourself. No one will come and cut the wire. The cage door isn't locked. It holds on fear and habit. Fear of losing familiar comfort and the habit of drifting with the current. But the current leads to the waterfall. The illusion of accessibility was created to hide the fact of robbery. They stole our future, selling it to us on credit. But as long as you're alive, as long as you have reason and hands, you can reclaim a piece of reality. Don't try to break the system. Just stop being its fuel. Build your ark while the sun shines.